In this video, I'm going to be discussing how your political preference and elections can affect your investments, especially this year when we have the US and UK elections. How can that affect your positions? How can it affect the stock market? Let's explore this a bit further. In what is set to be one of the biggest political years we've seen in a long time, elections in the US, in the UK, how is this going to affect your investments in the stock market? Your political preference, is it going to make a difference to your investments? Let's find out. We're going to be discussing whether or not a Labour or a Conservative party makes a difference on the performance in the stock market and what happens in a run-up to elections. Specifically as well within the US markets with Donald Trump and Biden, how is that going to affect US investments and what does the overall market do in reaction to these elections? With elections, we can expect stock market volatility. Why is this? There is a lot of uncertainty around elections. But more importantly, how does that volatile market affect your investments? The more volatile the stock market, the more your shares can go up and down. This can be a great opportunity, but at the same time, it can also be increased risk on your portfolio that you might not want to take. Election uncertainty is a big factor as well in the run-up to these presidential elections and general elections. We don't understand necessarily what the new leadership means for the economy and the country, and we also are not too sure on what policies that they might be bringing forward. This creates uncertainty within the stock market and again increased volatility. Election shocks also happen when the results defy what was predicted. Great turn of events, no one expected Donald Trump to be president. This was an election shock in the overall market. Whereas for the current elections in the UK, it's very much favoured that Labour would win this in a slam dunk situation. So could there be the argument that there's an economy shock if Conservatives get back in? It's defied what was the expectation and predicted, and the markets would naturally react to that shift. So overall with elections, we want to look at pre-election and we want to look at post-election. These are two different outlooks of what we can use to anticipate the overall feeling within the market. So with pre-elections, obviously investors are looking to predict what the outcome would be, what that leadership would look like, and what policies would be factored into the economy. This is what we call pre-election. So we can kind of get an idea of how the stock market is moving in the run-up to an election. Then with post-election, that is the actual result. How has this actually hit the market? How's it going to affect? Was it a shock result that people weren't anticipating? And overall, how is that new leadership and those policies going to affect the overall economy? It's very reactive to the current situation. If we can understand pre and post-election periods within the market, it will help investors to be able to navigate that and give us a good outlook of what to expect. How can we plan for that and how can we adjust for this political outcome? Whilst I was researching the International Review of Financial Analysis, there were some great points about the stock market, both for the UK and the USA, of exactly what can be expected in these elections. So one of the main factors we want to focus on is political uncertainty. If we are unsure where an economy is going, for example, in the UK, we have been a Conservative government for quite a while, so switching to Labour could be an uncertain period of time, especially for investors, especially some of those that are young investors that haven't experienced a Labour government. What does that mean from infrastructure spending? What does that mean from an overall outlook of what they're going to do to the economy? This can create uncertainty and can increase periods of time of volatility. A great example of this would be the UK opinion polls in April of 2015, where Conservative and Labour pretty much was split. They had an even split of 34% for each party. This then saw a reaction in the UK stock market of increased volatility due to the potential uncertainty of what's going to happen. This also happened in the US in the 2020 elections between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, where Joe Biden actually won the elections. This created the CBOE, the volatility index, to spike aggressively due to that uncertainty of not predicting that as an outcome. Having these as examples, we can see that when the market reacts to a situation that it was predicting and it wasn't the outcome, we can then see an increased amount of volatility coming into the stock market. So these are things that we want to be cautious of and prepared for. So let's now talk about what political party performs better for the stock market. Now, when we look at the US market and we look at between Republicans and Democrats, historically speaking, there isn't much difference in performance between the two of them. So that isn't a major effect within the US markets. However, some interesting facts around the UK from a Conservative government to a Labour government. Now, this history is only up to 2015, but it is very interesting nonetheless to take into account, especially if you have exposure to the UK stock market. The Conservative government have performed twice as well as the Labour market when they are in power. This is absolutely staggering to see, and it's a stat that I've never actually noticed before. And these stats go all the way back to the 1970s, so they're hard to argue with, 1970 to 2015. Some of the things may have changed after that, but twice as well, that is pretty crazy to know. And if you want me to break down the stats of exactly how much Conservative over a Labour government improved the investment on an average period from 1970 to 2015, is actually really staggering. It is a 7% increase more than Labour when Conservative are in power. That's an interesting stat to know. Another thing to know about the Conservative government against the Labour government, that earnings grew a lot quicker under Conservatives than they do under a Labour leadership as well. This is all statistically speaking. I'm not politically driven on either side. But overall, earnings grew by 11% under a Conservative government in comparison to a Labour government which only grew at 6%. So when we look at this 45-year history within the UK, having a Conservative government over a Labour government actually makes a big difference to our investments within the UK. With the Labour leader looking to get into power, what does that mean for our investment? Well, historically speaking, this could mean it's actually a bit of a downturn for us that are UK investing. However, overall, when we look at the global market within the UK market is generally very undervalued from a PE ratio perspective and very attractive. And let's not forget that these numbers can be skewed if you think about it. Over these periods, what's happened on the global stage that could have affected how the government ran during that period of time. Those are factors that this data hasn't taken into account, and maybe Labour market had some bigger issues to deal with on the global stage. Who knows? But those are the numbers. So when we look at the US markets, there's not a big difference between the Democratic performance in the stock market and the Republican performance in the stock market. But overall, what are the implications to investors? Well, at this moment in time, this has probably got to be the first time in political history where one of the presidential candidates has first of all released a pair of sneakers during his presidential election campaign and sold them out. But more importantly, has got so many legal cases against him as an individual and his family companies. A lot of people are saying that this is a political run-up on him and they don't want him getting into power. And a lot of people are just saying that this is his past catching up with him in his business dealings. Either way you look at it, overall, my opinion is it's quite suspect of how all of a sudden they really are attacking Donald Trump. And I think that he should be given his fair speech in order to be able to run for presidential candidate and not be removed from some of the states on the voting ballots. Now, this is going to be very interesting because some of his investigations are criminal and some of the results are due to come out before the actual presidential elections. Now, this is exactly what I was talking about when we discussed political uncertainty. How on earth in a pre-run-up to a presidential election can we even factor that in as an investor? So I would anticipate with how the markets are moving at this moment in time, they are performing at all-time highs. There is no doubt in my mind that we will see profit taking coming off the table within the US markets, and there will be a huge amount of political instability and uncertainty during all of these cases, and especially with Trump's case as a Republican candidate getting stronger and stronger and stronger. He is outrunning Joe Biden on all of the polls at this moment in time. So it's going to be a very interesting time in the run-up, because if you took away all of these outside scenario issues against him from a legal perspective, you would say that the post-election result is a Republican government, a Republican president who has his policies laid out. And obviously his policies as Donald Trump are pretty simple in that respect of increasing US employability, US businesses, putting US first. The downside to that for the stock market is obviously his tariffs and everything he wants to put against China, and that is a downside to him for the stock market. But there is so much in the pre-run up to this that we couldn't even fathom what post-election looks like. And overall, my advice usually would be is stay informed. But honestly, how do you stay informed in this scenario? We haven't seen it. These are unprecedented times, which is pretty crazy to look at. Overall, I anticipate a high amount of volatility in the US stock markets getting closer to that time. And both of these guys are doing this to increase their own vote into the next elections. It's not anything else other than that. So it's very important that we monitor these policies coming out from Joe Biden and the Democrats, and also from the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak on tax changes, on these new schemes that are coming to light. As overall, it's just here to boost their political image and hopefully give them votes. So it's going to be an interesting time to watch how this prevails, but overall there will be a huge amount of market volatility before the elections get started, mark my words. So if you are heavy in the US equities or the UK stock market, I would suggest being a little bit more conservative and taking a de-risked approach to the markets. And get in the comments if you think Donald Trump is going to become president or end up in jail, or if you think Joe Biden's going to win, or if you think the Labour government completely wipe out Rishi Sunak and are voted in, or if you think Conservatives make a comeback. Get in the comments, keen to know your thoughts. Make sure you thumbs up, comment and subscribe. I hope you've enjoyed this video.